Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our webinar tonight, Be the Best Parent That You Can Be. Discover 3 powerful insights that will contribute to your success as a parent. I'm Paul Johnson, and I'll be your host tonight. Our presentation is going to last approximately an hour, and we'll end with a question and answer period. So if you've got questions that come up during the presentation, I'd encourage you to write them down and hold on to them until the end, and then we can address them at that time. Our presenter tonight is Lynn Samita. Lynn is a dynamic international educator and a registered social worker with more than 30 years of professional experience. She's committed to helping parents perform their extremely important job of raising happy, healthy children who are equipped to embrace life with joy and confidence. So, Lynn, welcome.
Thank you, Paul. I'm really delighted to be on this webinar. You know, it's really exciting to be interacting with parents, and rather than just sending information out via email, this feels much more interactive, and so pretty exciting.
It's great. Glad to have this opportunity.
So tonight we are going to be discussing 3 powerful insights that I really feel will contribute to your success as a parent. And so as we look at those, I want to start from a countdown point of view and start with number 3. And that is that your behavior as a parent becomes a blueprint for your children's behavior. Now, I know as soon as I say that, I can almost hear people groan. The last thing they want to sort of put the focus on is that their behavior is going to be a blueprint for their kids. But this isn't about the negative. This is really about the positive. And so my focus isn't on guilt at all, but on the caring, positive behaviors that you can do as a parent and what a tremendous difference they can make. So now I do want to say, obviously, that, you know, criticizing and judging and all those kinds of things clearly will impact kids. And so if that's going on, it's going to show up in your kids, as we all know. And the other thing that, you know, so often happens is I have parents asking me about respect. You know, what do I do if my child doesn't respect me, or more often if my teenager doesn't respect me? And what I want to say on that is that if you're seeing disrespectful behavior, it really is a red flag for you to pay attention to. It means something is off in terms of how things are going in the home. Often what's not quite in balance is the power between the parents. And so if you're seeing that, I really encourage you to get some support, because it will not go away.
But isn't disrespectful behavior, isn't that something that just kind of happens naturally in most families? That, you know, at least there's a little bit of an experience with that at some point. Kids just kind of, you know, flexing their muscles a little bit.
Yeah, and I like to differentiate between an occasional incident of flexing muscles and kind of a chronic case of being just a little disrespectful, always pushing the edge, etc. When that pattern shows up, it really is telling you as parents to pay attention. Because somehow your teenager is picking up a cue that it's okay to be disrespectful to the father, to the mother. It doesn't really matter. But one of the parents is cueing that, and that's the pattern you want to nip in the bud.
Okay.
Yeah. So let's get on to the positive. What I want to focus on tonight is that your children, and again, especially teenagers, but starting when they're little, they really need to see you embodying your positive values directly, overtly. And so I think this is one of the things we often take for granted. You know that you care and you're loving and generous perhaps and so on, but how clear is it to your children that that's the place you're coming from? And so I want to encourage you to really be direct about the ways that you're embodying your positives. Okay, so perhaps your kids see you helping somebody at the grocery store or getting involved helping someone. When they see that, it's a powerful thing that they can lock into their system. But what makes it even better is if you involve them, if they start to feel the benefit of being helpful, being caring, being kind, being generous. As well as, I'm really going to encourage you to do something that most of us have been trained not to do, and that's speak out loud, to express, to put the focus overtly on why we're doing what we're doing. So many people, have been trained sort of not to toot their own horn and so on, or not to make explicit when we're doing an act of kindness and so forth. And in fact, you need to. Kids cannot mind read what's going on for you.
Well, I think that a lot of kids, I mean, I've got 2 children, as you know, and, as kids grow up and they're doing all the things that they're involved in doing, they're oblivious to what's going on around them a lot of the time because they're so involved and so caught up in what they're doing that they're not really paying attention to what mom and dad are up to.
That's the point. And so in order for that to log into their system, we have to do something that kind of gets their attention, helps them just stop for a moment or puts the spotlight on what you're doing and why you're doing it.
Right.
So involving them in actions helps, and being explicit about where you're coming from. Now, my only caution is when you involve kids in helping other people, be careful you don't put your director's hat on. So it's really easy to just start telling your son or your daughter to give a hand, to do this or that. If they don't feel like they have a choice, if they don't feel like they're being included, then it's easy for them to resent.
It's just another chore then.
That's right. And it's an action they're being forced, in quotes,
to
do. So that's obviously going to backfire. Now, I want to give a few examples of things that you could draw attention to. In traffic, sometimes you let somebody in. They just obviously need that little bit of kindness. If you do that, which is great, more people need to be doing that, I think, say out loud in the car, "Have a great day." Just wish the person well that you've just let in, because you've done an act of kindness. But if you put the words to it, kids get to hear you do that. And it's just a little way of waking them up, as you say, out of their world and flagging that behavior.
Well, it's just a little bit of a cutis to perk up your ears and take notice.
Yeah. And you're giving a little bit of an insight into your perspective.
Right.
Random acts of kindness. We've all heard about them. They're fantastic. But it's great to talk to your kids about why you're doing them. Why did you do that act? What was going on for you? And I want to tell you a story about a fellow. I really learned something from this man. And he was out with his partner and his daughter for breakfast at a restaurant. And at a table quite near them was a young family, a few kids, mom and dad. Anyway, at the end of breakfast, this man decided that he wanted to buy breakfast for this young family. So he motioned to the waitress and he paid for their breakfast and so on. When the family went to pay for their breakfast, they found out what had happened. And they came over to this man. And what's interesting is that this was not a family that kind of looked like they couldn't afford breakfast or anything like that. And they came over. And the wife said, I so appreciate what you've done. We hardly ever get out for breakfast with the kids because it's really difficult with young kids. And it's pretty expensive by the time you all have breakfast out. And they thanked this man and so on, and away they went. Story that's very interesting is this man's daughter said to him, "Dad, why did you buy breakfast for that family?" Like, they didn't look all that poor. And the dad said, sweetheart, it's really not about whether people are poor or not. It's not up to us to decide, whether somebody needs an act of kindness or not. It's really just about us behaving in the way that we want to be.
Well, and I can really see this kind of thing being, or presenting rather, some really cool teaching moments or teachable moments for our kids.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so there was this great discussion with this fellow's daughter about who deserves kindness and where are we coming from and so on. And when I heard the story, it really got me thinking, how often do I evaluate whether somebody deserves some kindness or not? And how much more freeing it would be if I get out of that and just decide, do I feel like extending myself?
Right.
And so the acts of kindness and the acts of generosity are limitless. We can be generous with our time, we can be generous with our money, We can be generous with our caring and our compassion. We can be generous with even creativity, ideas, support. There's so many different ways to be generous, and this is a great example. Okay, so we've got, that's insight number 3. Let's go to insight number 2. Rules never create values. Now, this is a very controversial one. All the time I get parents asking me about rules and what rules should they have at different ages and stages and how many rules and so forth. And the thing that I want to say is that rules will never create values. So why? Because here's how it works. Rules dictate behavior, our actions. But what's more important to focus on is how to nurture feelings. What we want to do is nurture feelings of compassion, generosity, kindness, confidence. And you know, Paul, there's no rules that will ever generate those. Rules, in fact, can often work against them. You know, and of course you need some rules. We need rules for guidelines. We need some rules for safety. But it's really very, very easy to slide into believing that a rule will create what we want in our kids, the values. And that's simply not true. So I want to encourage people for insight number 2 is to think about rules as a structure. That rules can kind of create the framework so that we can be safe. A bit like, you know, at the swimming pool, obviously there's rules about just walking and being safe and so forth. But we go to the swimming pool to swim.
Right. And to have fun.
That's right. And so that's what we want to be focusing on. And so what are the values that we really want to be encouraging kids to be embodying? How do we create those rather than taking a shortcut and thinking that a rule will get there? You know, lots of times you have rules about treating other people well. Mm-hmm. Now, you can set that rule as a guideline. But the problem is, it's so easy to get into the hamster wheel. Now you've made it kind of a rule. So now you have to enforce it. Now you've got consequences or punishments or whatever you want to call it. And it can go round and round. And the truth is you may not be getting at what you're really after.
Right.
Yeah.
Lots of time and energy focusing on the externals and very little focusing on the internal.
That's it. And so, again, it's how do we really get what we're going for?
Yeah.
We're going for creating kids that have confidence, that are kind, that are gentle, that are respectful. You cannot legislate any of that.
Right.
You can only nurture it. And so one of the things that I really like to encourage parents to do is pick one value that you'd really like to encourage in your children. Set that as your focus, maybe for the week, maybe longer, whatever fits for you, and challenge yourself to get creative, to think about how to embody that particular value.
Okay, so how would you suggest that I do that, for instance? How do I implement that?
Okay, so let me ask you to give me a value as a parent that you really like to encourage in your kids.
Appreciation.
Perfect. So you would like them to be more appreciative. Is that right?
Right. I'd like them to grow up in such a way that they appreciate other people, and that they appreciate the things that are around them, and that they express that they're expressive of that.
Okay. So both appreciative and expressive. Okay. So the challenge then I would give you is to see how many appreciations you can rack up in a day. How many per day can you log in?
Right.
How often can you find yourself seeing something to appreciate and then speaking it?
Right.
Or acknowledging it. Okay? And just set that for yourself as a task, as a challenge. Now, the other thing you can do is set it as a challenge for your family. So imagine setting it up that this week as a family, Maybe you're going to pick a goal. We want to hit 50 appreciations this week. Now everybody's looking for those opportunities.
Right.
They're coming home or they're talking or they're watching for how many they're each adding to the total.
Right. And it comes back to that perception discussion, doesn't it? We begin to see the things that we're looking for.
That's right.
And before long, we begin to see it all around us.
Exactly.
And so we become more aware and, yeah.
And the converse is true. If we're looking at what's not working, if, we're tracking the things that are a problem, then that's also what you're going to see.
We're going to see all the problems coming up.
That's right. So as you say, it is completely a perception thing. And we want to be training and encouraging our kids to look for the positive.
Right.
Look for the appreciations in this case.
Yeah.
And it's incredible how that will open up opportunities because the mind will go after that. It starts to look for those opportunities.
Great.
Okay. So let's go to the number one insight that I want to talk about tonight, and then we'll be able to open it up for questions. The number one insight that I have for parents is that your childhood experiences are influencing how you parent. That's right. So maybe you've already heard this thought before, but I want us to really look closely at it tonight. I'm going to take it into more depth because I think we often understand this concept, but it's not easy to step back and sort of analyze our own experiences and see how they could be impacting us as parents. So one of the things that research has shown us is that if you or your partner have experienced a big upset, at whatever age, let's make it up, say at 7, when your child is 7, there may well be inside of you an emotional trigger that goes off. So that key events in your own history that have occurred in your childhood will often be mirrored in how you handle things with your children. So I think for lots of people, that's something they haven't deeply understood. They know their childhood is impacting maybe how they're talking, but not to the degree of how specific it can actually be. Yeah, so I was talking to a father not long ago, and he was describing something that was going on with his teenage son, actually, and a difficulty he was having. And so I said to him, what was it like for you when you were a teenager? How was it for you? And he related what his teenage years had been like.
Right.
And immediately he could see the link. Oh my gosh, he said, I literally had to step in. His dad was an alcoholic. His drinking went way out of control when this man was a teenager, and suddenly he had to be the stabilizing influence. So when his son became a teenager, it was like a switch clicked in his brain, and suddenly he instantly wanted his son to be more responsible and was extremely frustrated with his son's lack of maturity, as he put it. The expectations went up, the frustrations went up, and so on, and there's a direct link.
So, Lynn, do you think that is that like a protection mechanism that you're talking about? I'm just asking for some clarity here.
I don't think it's so much a protection mechanism as it's a trigger, and what I mean by trigger is something in the present kicks off in our mind, in our brain, like a chain reaction. So for this man, his son turning 13, becoming a teenager, was like, something in our computer calendar flags up, comes up on the screen and says, now it's time to grow up.
Right, because that's the experience the dad had.
Exactly, yeah. Another example is, let's say your parents divorced. And you were 7. What we know is that when your child turns 7, there'll often be a sensitivity in your system, almost at an unconscious level, in terms of what's going on for her or him at 7 years of age. So the system really links your experience to what's going on with your children.
So it's almost like your experience then comes back and re-affects you, but it also affects your kids.
Exactly. Because what then will show up is different kinds of behavior. In the example I just gave, this man's expectations went through the roof.
Right.
He expected far more of his teenage son because he'd had to step up to the plate.
Right.
In other situations, parents will want to compensate. So at 7, they experience loss through a separation or divorce. They may start to compensate and want to give by whatever their children things to kind of pad or protect, them from any kind of shock or trauma. And so there really is a powerful link.
It seems to me that kind of behavior on the part of me as a parent, for instance, even if my son or daughter is only, fairly young, 7 or 8 years old, that's got to be confusing for them. To see a shift in mom or dad like that, they've got to be wondering what's going on.
Yeah, it's going to set up confusion, and they probably won't even bring it up to conscious level, but there is this level of confusion of not understanding, as you say, what's going on. And suddenly, parents' behavior is changing. So yeah, it definitely has an impact. And what lots of kids see is parents' reaction. That's all that they see is the reaction to the trigger.
Right.
Yeah. And so, I say to parents, the more insight you have on your own history, the better. Because so much of this is really at an unconscious level. I can't tell you how many times, parents have said to me, I think I had a pretty normal childhood. I don't recall anything big. It wasn't like a big trauma or anything. But as we take time to sort of go back and look at a few of those things start to show up. And even if there's not a lot of feeling, you don't remember being really upset, it doesn't mean it didn't log in your nervous system.
Right.
So very often things will be logged in there, and the way the system has protected itself is to not have much feeling.
Right. So is that feeling suppressed, or is it just not really even been logged there?
It can be either, but obviously the system is protecting you
right.
from the intense fear, pain, whatever it might be, and so it puts it down at an unconscious level, and we figure out ways of coping.
Right.
So I really think this is so important. What I've done is develop a handout that we're going to give people through this webinar so that they can kind of become their own detectives and figure out and tease out what situations, what experiences might have affected me.
Right.
So let me just tell people a bit about what this handout has. So just picture 3 columns, and in the first column, we're going to have your experiences. What was it like, say, between the ages of 0 to 6? Do you remember anything? How did it feel for you? What was it like? Just general observations, and then if there are any kind of jarring or shocking events, you can log those in. In the second column is how you coped. So if mom and dad separated, and I don't remember being all that upset, but when I think about coping, I just remember doing all kinds of things on my own. I remember being very self-sufficient, just feeling like I had to make stuff happen. That's what we call coping. It's how I managed. Or for some kids, they'll get very clingy, and need a lot of support and so on and so forth. Yeah. So the second column is how you coped, because your children can also mimic those coping behaviors. And then the third column is what you're seeing in your own children.
Right. At the same age. At
the same age, exactly. So you get to go through this little chart and fill out information. Okay, what do I notice what happened between 0 and 6, say 7 to 12, and then as a teenager? Okay, and let's say for teenager, if as a teenager one of the ways you coped is to kind of do your own thing. Maybe you needed to lie a little bit about where you were or where you weren't or what you were doing and so on. When your son or daughter becomes a teenager, those very behaviors you used may trigger rage inside of you. Or you may go the opposite. You may feel like a lot of those things are okay, when in fact they're really not very good behaviors, but you're just going to let your kids slide along because you did those behaviors. It doesn't seem like such a big deal. And that's where parents can get into kind of a debate between them where you'll see different standards. One parent saying, well, that's really not acceptable behavior, and another parent thinks it's normal.
Right.
Because in their family it was normal.
Because that was their experience growing up.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So I created this so parents can gather some of that data. But clearly, the really important thing ultimately is to clear out, those sort of sticks of dynamite that when I get triggered in the present by something my child does, my teenager does, and I get triggered and have a bigger than normal reaction, I want to clear out that backlog. That's the ideal.
So I'm kind of seeing a connection then between the whatever it is that one of my kids is doing and my reaction to it, and I kind of see it tying back, and I think this is what you're saying, is it ties back to my own experience as a child.
That's right.
And that's what's fueling my reaction.
Exactly. And so it will fuel your reaction in so many different directions. You may have trouble letting go. If you felt loss as a kid, when your kids start to want to pull away and have more independence, you may cling on to them and not even know why you're clinging.
Yeah.
And you may say it's normal. You may feel badly about it. You may rationalize it in a variety of ways. But really, it's coming from that early feeling inside of you of loss.
Right. And that's what it is that I'm reacting to, is that early feeling of loss.
Exactly. And so there's no amount of you promising yourself to be better, I'm going to be more calm, I'm going to be let go better, etc. If that stuff's in your system, you're going to get triggered. Just like if you had to deal with an alcoholic parent and all the uncertainty that goes with any kind of addiction. When things start to get a little unpredictable, as they do with kids, you can't plot everything, and as they get older, it gets even more unpredictable. You could feel less and less safe. And again, then you're going to want to go for control at exactly the wrong time when your kids are wanting to have more of their own control, power, and freedom.
And really needing those things.
That's right. And your ability to teach them and guide them into effective behaviors is going to be impaired.
It's going to be, and again, I'm seeing a connection here. It's going to be impaired because really what you're trying to do is manage them as opposed to giving them skills that they're going to need as adults. You're trying to control and manage as opposed to equip.
That's right. And you're trying to manage your own feelings. So you've got a double whammy. Manage your own feelings and manage
their behavior.
That's right. That is such a hard road. That is such a setup.
And I guess at some level I'm thinking that if I can manage their behavior, I'm going to feel better.
Yes, that's exactly what you're
And that's never going to work.
Well, it rarely works. That's right. So obviously, I'm a big, big fan of parents getting the support. Number one, to identify, because so much of this is in our blind spot. And that's why I want to talk about it. That's why we're doing the webinar, getting information out that we all have blind spots.
Right.
And in those blind spots are things that are going to be affecting us. So we want to find a way to stop keeping it as a blind spot. We want to shine the light on, find out the information that could be triggering us, and then ideally do something about it.
Right.
Yeah. So the thing I want to tell parents about is that I've developed a workshop just for parents to do exactly this. Yeah, it's called Success Beyond Beliefs, just for parents. In the past, we've had parents in these open workshops, and I've been so encouraged by what parents have said to me after. It has been absolutely transformative, and so I've decided let's dedicate a workshop to parents where they can come, identify the stuff that's getting in their way, have an opportunity to do some clearing, and really get onto a solid foundation. And so I'm very excited about that workshop, and it's coming up in October. So we've planned it for October 13th and 14th, which is after Thanksgiving. And it's also, I wanted to do it early enough in the year that we could really help set parents up for having a great year with their kids. And so this is going to be an opportunity for parents to come in, do some clearing. Did I get those dates right?
Yep.
Okay.
You're right. The slide that we've created is incorrect.
Okay, I'm just looking at it right here.
Yeah, so it is October the 13th and 14th,
okay.
Not November. So October 13th and 14th, Saturday and Sunday.
Okay, great. Yeah, good. So we'll fix that on our information that we're going to be sending parents. Anyway, I'm not going to say much more about that now. I'll talk a little more at the end of our time together. But I wanted to save time for questions from participants. So now, do you want to give parents instructions on if they have questions or comments?
Sure. Well, if folks are joining us online tonight, there is a question box on the left side of the screen. You can just fill in your name, email address, and type in whatever question you might have there for Lynn, and we'll see it pop up here, and we can she'll be happy to answer those. Kind of to get the ball rolling, though, let me.
And if people are on the phone?
If people are on the phone, you can kind of raise your hand, as it were, by pressing *2.
Okay.
And we'll see that indicated here, and we'll invite you into the conversation.
Okay, good.
So to get the ball rolling where questions are concerned, Lynn, you're talking about clearing some of the stuff out of our nervous systems.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that occurs to me is I wonder how widespread or how common it is for somebody to have trauma that's locked into their nervous system. Do you think that this applies to, is this just for, the extreme cases or just a few people, or is this more widespread than we might think?
That's a great question. And yes, it's more widespread than we think. And it reminds me in a way of how we used to think about abuse. And abuse was really, we only called, say, physical abuse if you kind of got beat within an inch of your life.
Right.
That was the kind of common understanding or definition of abuse. And for a long time, emotional abuse wasn't even considered abuse. I mean, it just was considered normal for lots of people.
Right.
So we really have come to understand in a much more profound way the impact that things like hitting, emotionally, name-calling, or any kind of emotional abuse, sexual abuse, all of those things have much more impact than we ever dreamed.
Right.
And likewise, we're starting to see so do events like a separation.
Mm-hmm.
I was, in fact, talking with someone today, and her parents separated, and there was no conversation about it.
Just all of a sudden?
Yeah. It was kind of announced, and then it kind of happened, and that was it.
Wow.
And what was so profound for her is she felt invisible. She felt so unimportant, and that was the meaning she gave it, that they didn't bother to talk to her, didn't bother to explain things, didn't field any questions.
Right.
Now, I'm pretty sure parents weren't doing that maliciously in any way. They probably weren't sure what to say. They thought maybe even if we don't say too much and we just get on with our lives, that'll be the best thing for the children. There's a whole bunch of different reasons. But what we're not realizing, or what we're realizing now, is these things have tremendous impact.
Right.
So likewise, what you and I experienced as kids has affected us. And the way that we know that is almost every parent finds themselves in different situations where they're saying things they promised themselves they'd never say, or acting in ways that they thought they'd never behave that way. Even, vowing I will never be like my mom or dad, and then, oh my gosh.
I sound just like my mother.
Yeah, turning out, that's right. So obviously our experiences have logged in.
Right.
And we're copying and replicating some of that behavior. So that's why, tonight I really wanted, with that first insight that I talked about, to really start to highlight caring behaviors in a much more explicit way.
Right.
Get used to really doing them and naming them and saying them. That's a great way to offset other things that your kids may have experienced. The second, as I was saying, is to not be relying on rules as a way to kind of create the values that you want in your kids. That's not going to deliver. And you may have obedient kids, but you won't have the love, the joy, the creativity, the expressiveness that maybe you'd like, or the closeness even in a family. Okay.
Great. So can you talk to me for just a minute about what do you see as the outcomes in terms of the workshop that you're talking about, Success Beyond Beliefs, just for parents? As a parent, and I come to this workshop, what are some of the outcomes? What are the things that I can expect, not necessarily from the workshop itself, but as a result of being there?
Well, I'll just give you feedback that we've received from parents, because that's always the proof, right, is in the pudding. And parents have said they feel calmer. They just feel like so much is cleared out of their system that now they're dealing only with the present of what's actually coming up. So I remember one mom saying to me, I was so reactive in the past. I just was so tense, so on edge, and now I feel calm, I feel at ease, I feel like I've got more room inside emotionally to just be present for what's going on. Parents have said that they've totally shifted their relationship with their kids so that they're more connected, they're having more fun, they're having more joy. A very indirect result was what one father said to me, which is interesting. He said, I didn't realize until I got to the workshop that part of what was gnawing away at me is a feeling that I wasn't doing what I should be doing in my life, that I'm in a job I don't really love, I'm not going forward, and what kind of a parent and dad and role model am I being?
Right. What kind of example are you setting?
That's right. And so that was gnawing at him and kind of undermining his confidence in kind of a subtle background way. And he came up to me after the workshop, and he literally had tears in his eyes, and he said, I know this wasn't what the workshop was all about. He said, but I feel like I know what I want to do with my life. And he said, I got a direction now, and I'm going to move in it. And just the joy and the peace that was in his face was so heartwarming.
Yeah.
So there's really such a broad range of things that parents can get out of this workshop. Overall, my goal is for parents to come away feeling so much more solid that they can really step into their power, their strength, and enjoy that job of being a parent, because it's really a tough job. And there's so many demands, and it's such a fast pace, and our world is moving faster and faster. So if we don't have lots of confidence, and if we don't have the feeling like we're doing a good job from the inside, it's really difficult to get that feeling from the outside.
Yeah, and as you're talking about it, the image of a solid foundation comes to mind. The difference between standing on something that's firm and solid as opposed to standing on something that's shifting.
Yeah.
And it just seems to me to be, if there's something that I can do as a parent to position myself
that's right
on firm ground, then how much better is that going to be for my kids?
Exactly. You literally cannot.
It's like building a whole new legacy for them.
That's right. So you can't put a price on that And it's intangible, but it's one of those things that's unbelievably important, even though we can't quantify it in very easy, measurable kinds of things.
Right.
You know, I remember a parent saying to me, Lynn, I don't need to be perfect. I just need to know I'm on the right track.
Yeah.
And I think that's what so many of us have wanted as parents, to feel like we're on the right track. And I'm more convinced than ever that if we do our own personal work and get stuff out of our system that's getting in the way or that's creating that impatience, that temper tantrum, that criticalness, that kind of lack of expressiveness, all of those are symptoms of stuff that's logged in our system. Because in some way or other, you know, there's fear in our system of relaxing. There's fear in our system of being open, maybe of being gentle, maybe of sharing vulnerability. And all of that will translate to our kids.
Right. And I've got another question that I want to ask you, but before I do that, I just want to turn my attention for a moment to the folks that have joined us for the webinar tonight, and to invite you, if you have questions, to either enter them online or to press *2 to raise your hand, and we'd be more than happy to, or Lynn would be more than happy to address those questions as they're presented. So you made reference earlier in the webinar tonight to the fact that our kids pick up our behavior and kind of mirror them. Our behavior becomes a blueprint for our kids' behavior, and what I'm thinking, you know, as you're talking about, you know, our reactions as adults to the stuff that happened in our formative years. You know, I don't want to. You know, there's stuff that's happened in my life, just like there's stuff that's happened in everybody's life, and I don't want to pass that on generation to generation.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that this is a great opportunity for me to clear out some of that stuff, not only for my kids, but for their kids too.
Yeah. And you know, Paul, we're now understanding how it literally passes on generation to generation. So I'll give you an example. My dad was Japanese. And so after World War II, there was lots of feeling about the Japanese people, animosity and so on and so forth. So he learned to cope with that. And he had to live through that. And so what he did is shut down his feelings, work really hard to be an upstanding citizen. And he used to say things to us as kids like, you know, don't forget you're a Samhita. So that decoded into your behavior has to be of a certain standard.
Right.
And I know that he meant it as sort of to inspire us to step up to the plate, to help us be the best we could be.
Yeah, meant it positively, had only good intentions at heart.
That's right. But I know for some of my siblings, that really started to become almost like a pressure, a burden. It did not necessarily open us up to be the best we could. It was like this threat hanging over us.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we have to behave a certain way. And it was his fear in the community, that there would be backlash and that he didn't want us to be hurt and so on and so forth. Well, all that gets passed on from generation to generation.
Right.
And so as much as we can, we want to clear that out of our system so that we, as you say, don't pass it on to our kids. Because so often it does, whether in a direct manner or in compensation.
Right.
You know, wanting them to have everything that we didn't have.
Right.
That's another very common pattern.
Yeah.
So,
and that's not always a healthy thing.
No, exactly. It's not often going to serve. You know, we also see if we had to work really, really hard for things,
we want it easier for our kids.
Or the opposite. We want them to work really, really hard.
Okay, yeah.
Both ways, Paul. And you know, today, things are very different. There's a lot more money floating around than was the case in your day or my day.
Yeah.
And so we can't use those standards.
Right.
Good. So I know we're getting close to
time here.
Yeah.
So just as we close here for a moment, or before we close, talk to me about the workshop again.
Okay. So this is a 2-day workshop just for parents. So an opportunity for parents to come in a safe environment to be addressing the things that they want to address. But what's unique about this workshop is you do a lot of the work individually.
Right.
So it's really not a kind of group thing other than the fact that you are in a group.
Right.
But it's an opportunity for you to be guided into looking inside and logging and clarifying what's in there.
So I'm not going to have to reveal a bunch of stuff to a group of people, right?
No.
Okay.
That's right. And, there's group sharing where people say they, things they realize and insights and aha moments and so on. But it's not that kind of full group sharing all the time.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're going to be guided in that, and you're going to be working with the journal and so forth. And then you're going to have an opportunity, almost like a computer, to do a reboot in terms of clearing stuff out of your system, which is how people come out feeling so much freer, so much less burdened. Some parents clear a lot of grief if they've had that in their history. It ranges what people clear. And really get on what we talked about earlier, that solid foundation.
Right.
Yeah.
Great.
So 2 days, October 13th, 14th.
Right.
Yeah, and we've set a special price if you want to come as a couple. The second person will get a serious discount. I think it's $300.
A $300 discount, yeah, for the second person.
Exactly, because it's so wonderful if both parents can be there.
Right. And
I know that's challenging, for both parents to get away on a weekend, little more difficult. But, if they can pull it off, we're going to make it well worth their while. Now, the space is limited, so register early.
Right.
Yeah, and how they do that, let me walk through this. All right. So on your screen, if you're looking at that, you should see on the left side some buttons, and there's a Success Beyond Beliefs button. If you click on that, that link will take you right to our registration page. And so the information that we're asking you to supply is pretty self-explanatory. There's just a couple of things we'd like to draw your attention to. One is if you use a different email when you fill that in, you're going to probably end up getting 2 emails from us. So we'd like to encourage you to use the same email that you used when you registered for the seminar, this webinar rather. It just makes it so much simpler. Also, we're going to be in touch with you once you register. So if you haven't heard from us within a week, please be in touch just in case there's a computer glitch. You never know these days, but we'll be directly in touch with you about your registration and getting you information and so on. Now, also on that screen, there's a button, a green button I think it is. Let's see. Oh, yeah, we've also got the button for the handout.
For the handout, it says Parents Handout on it.
That's right.
Yeah.
So that's there for you to download, to fill out, and it makes it real easy, and you can then gather data on what could be buried in your system, what could be in the blind spot.
Right. So, Lynn, there's just a couple of questions here that maybe we can pick up on just before we close tonight. One's from Linda, and she's asking, how would you suggest regulating the amount of time that kids spend on the computer without setting rules? Stopping kids from spending excessive amounts of time on the computer seems to be a common challenge for parents and kind of breeds resentment in our kids.
Yeah.
So, any suggestions?
Yeah. I think this is a beautiful one to not make a rule, but make it a guideline. So a guideline informs us, helps us know what track we're on. So what I would suggest is talking with your children about what do they think is reasonable, what do you think is reasonable, and finding some common ground there. Now, if kids feel like you're in control mode or restrictive mode, they'll start to get sneaky. So they'll say, I'm doing homework. I have to be online for this. I'm researching this. And then while they've got that screen open, they'll be doing other things. And I hear all the time with kids on how they start to maneuver around parents. That's exactly the opposite of what we want.
Right.
The computer is an amazing tool. It is their world. We want to be understanding that and yet setting some reasonable guidelines. So part of it is having conversation about it, setting some general rules, but not getting into being Nazi. But if they're not falling within those guidelines that you've talked about, the key is to have some conversation about what's going on. Okay? So don't fall back on a rule. Fall back on conversation.
Right.
What are you feeling? What's going on? I'm feeling like we're not working together on this. And the reason you want them not on the computer all the time, you've got some good reasons. You want them getting to sleep at a reasonable time. You want good conversation with them. You want them to be well-rounded in terms of activities. So this is the other part of the answer, Linda, which is the more we encourage kids to have the balance of really engaging face-to-face activities. So you want to be sure that your son or daughter has some positive face-to-face interactive kinds of things that are going on. That they come to the table and have some quality conversation, or they're willing to chat with you at the end of the day, that they're engaged in activities, be it sports or music or creative activities, that are engaging them and aren't computer-based. So that's what we're looking for, is that balance, but not to make the computer stuff a tug of war.
Great.
Good.
Well, Lynn, thank you. Thanks for all of your insights. I know that I appreciate them. I know that the folks that have joined us online tonight appreciate them. And I'm really so happy that you've been able and willing to share your insights with us. For those of you that have joined us tonight, this webinar is going to be available for replay, and you'll be receiving all those details in an email tomorrow. And again, if you know other people that you think would benefit from our webinar tonight, please feel free to share this replay information with them. We'd love to get it into their hands.
Yeah, I really, I want to chip in there, Paul, and just say my interest and desire is for parents to be supported. I think this is an incredibly challenging time to be a parent. There are not simple answers. Things are changing so fast with technology and so on. And we need to be banding together. We need to be supporting each other. So I would really appreciate you passing this information on. Let parents know about this workshop, and it's an amazing opportunity for them to do some powerful work in a really short period of time, and it will make a profound difference in how they parent and the relationships they have with their kids.
So I just want to encourage people then to register, because there is limited space.
That's right.
Really the workshop is coming up quickly.
Yeah.
And so we want everybody that wants to be there, we want to make sure to be able to have space for them. So register early.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the only one I'm doing just for parents for this year. And so it will not be available, for the rest of this year after this one in October. And we haven't even set dates into 2013. So we'll just see how we go with that.
Great. Okay, thank you, Lynn. Now, for the folks that have joined us tonight, if you've got questions, or if questions come up after we're done this evening, feel free to contact Lynn by email. Her email address has been included at the bottom of all the emails that you've received over the last couple of weeks, and I know that she'd be really happy to hear from you. So thanks to everybody that's joined us tonight. We've really enjoyed our conversations with you, and we hope to see you at the October Success Beyond Beliefs just for parents. And so good night, everybody. Thanks for joining us.
Good night.